Project for today is going to be this Cub Cadet XT1. It's got a busted deck down in here. This bracket busted off for the lift. So we're going to have to, you can see the big hole in it there. We're going to have to try to patch this back together. These were not the heaviest mower. They were okay if you were just using it on a small yard in town or something, but they were not a very good mower. They're on the cheaper end. It had the Kohler 7000 series 22 horse in them. That wasn't a bad motor. The single cylinder Courage series of this kind of same era was the bad one. These twin cylinders weren't too bad. This one, it's got, let's see how many hours it has on it. It's got 191 hours on it. The actual mower's okay, but they use really cheap tires on them is one thing I've noticed. They get weather cracked really fast and you end up having to put tubes in them and the decks fall apart. That's the two main issues with these. Otherwise, the rest of the mower was not too terrible, but it was just the deck. If you could get one that had the welded deck instead of the stamped deck, they were a little bit better, but they were still just a cheaper end mower. But we'll get going pulling the deck out of there and then see what we have to do to patch it up. So we'll see if we can get this belt out of here without pulling that keeper off. Yeah, that came off of there. I think it's off some of the pulleys on the deck too. When it broke, it probably popped it off of something there. And then we'll pull this pin here for the front deck hanger. And it just slides ahead. And the other side is pretty much disconnected, but it does have the cable for the deck engagement. It has that hook to it, so we got to get that out of there. There's a pin that runs through it. That's so stuck in there. Once you pull the pin out, they usually slide out, but this one was twisted, stuck twisted. And normally you wouldn't be able to pull that whole bracket out of there, but you can see that tore right out of the deck. The welds looked like they held. It was just the thin material. So we'll see if we can maybe plate that and set it back down in there, and then we'll probably weld that back on. These decks are not the easiest to weld on, especially they're so rusted usually. We'll disconnect this cable for the engagement. That's being stubborn too. There we go. Throw that to the back, and we gotta go to the other side. Pull this pin over here. And that should be, pull that off of there, and then I'll raise up the lever. I had it down all the way to do this. Raise that up. We should be able to pull the deck out now. And we can get a better look at that. It tore out of there pretty good, but even the paint isn't very good on it. You can see how I'm just flaking it off with my fingers. Grass and water get in there and it's just gonna make all this even worse. So we'll try to set the piece on here and see what we got going on. It's set like that. It's still bent forward, so we'll have to pound all this back down, kind of get it flat. It looks like it's actually twisted a little bit too, unless it's supposed to sit. Well, I guess it is supposed to sit a little bit to the side, because this one's like that too. This one looks okay. Might not be a bad idea to take a piece of angle iron and put in here or something to weld it to it, but we'll wait and see if that one breaks on them later down the road. So I think I'll take a hammer, maybe flatten this out, and then I'll pound that down and see if we can get that fairly flat where it'll go back together before we weld it. So got a hammer here. It's a little bit better. Then we've got this piece here. Flatten that out a little bit. Kind of just roughing in all this stuff. It's not terrible. I think what I'll do is I'll grind all this stuff clean, and then I'll weld it in, and then put a plate underneath it, maybe weld to that. I'll maybe drill. There's a couple of spots maybe here and on the other side that we can drill in and do like a plug weld on it. But other than that, there's not a heck of a lot I can do to really strengthen this up too much other than just welding it back together. It's kind of surprising how thin. It looks thicker with the grass on it, but this is like, I don't even know what thickness that would be. It's 1/16 of an inch maybe, and for a mower deck you need something a lot thicker than that. So I'm gonna take the grinder and we'll clean all this up, and then I'm gonna grind a spot for the ground clamp to hook to, so you have clean metal there, and I'll have to grind that piece that broke off also. Well, I've got it pretty good where it's sitting down in here. There's just this one little spot that it won't go down in. I'm just gonna see if I can hammer it a little bit. I might have to take something and get in there to file that edge down a little bit. There's a burr on it that's not letting it go down. Or I maybe just weld it on top. It's sitting pretty straight actually. I can fill that gap with weld if I bend that up a little bit over here. It's pretty thin. You can bend it with my Leatherman. That's how thin it is. And I think we're just gonna have to call that pretty close to good. There's going to be quite a bit of welding all the way around that. And I've got to grind a spot for my ground clamp yet. But I think we're pretty close to being able to weld. I might tack it on the top here and then go on the underside and weld it, because I did clean that up, and it'll be a better weld because I was able to clean up the bottom of this really well, but getting in all these grooves and stuff, it was hard to get it very clean, so it's not the cleanest on top. So I think I'm going to flip it over, and after I tack this, I'll flip it over and weld it on the bottom. Well, it's not pretty, but it'll hold. This is a flux core wire feed welder I'm using, so they don't weld the nicest for the looks, but they do hold. So this was quite a gap I filled in all through here. Back in here it got pretty ugly, but the rest of it, this part here is pretty good. So it'll hold, it just doesn't look the nicest. I'll take some black paint and I'm gonna paint the inside here where I cleaned it off so it doesn't rust too fast anyway. And then I'll flip it over and clean out the other side, and then we'll paint that too. This side, I only welded a few spots, but that here is really ugly. That was from my wire was getting bound up in the cable for some reason, but then it broke loose. I straightened out the cable. I think it might have just had too much of a kink in it, so it was getting stuck. We'll spray a little paint on this too. And the spot that I ground off for the ground clamp, it should be good enough for what we're doing. I guess this spot here the paint's missing. I'll touch that up too. So we'll let that dry and then we'll put the deck back on. And I think this spring here just fell under. It's not in the greatest shape, but that connected back here, so we'll have to reconnect that up. That's for the belt tensioner, and then the belt went around like that. And I'll have to get it back around that keeper here. So the paint's pretty dry. I'm gonna pull this guard off and we're gonna put some washers on these bolts. Hopefully it'll hold this down. I'm gonna just kind of bend this back in the kind of the shape that it was. So we should be able to put some washers on each one of the bolts to kind of hold that down, and this hole is still intact. So I'll just put a washer on that one. It was just bent from getting caught when that busted off of there. So I've got a couple of pretty large washers and then one smaller one for this hole over here. We'll get them all started and then cinch it down tight. It's kind of sprung, so we got to bend it a little bit to fit everything. Other than replacing the whole shield here, this is about the only way we can fix it, unless I welded that up, but this was really thin metal. There we go. You pretty much need to have that in here, otherwise your belt will pop off when you release the tension. That's how you turn the blades on and off, is this moves back and forth with the cable that comes through, and when it lets the tension off it's pretty loose, so the belt will pop off of these if they don't have these kind of work as the keepers. So now we're ready to slide it back underneath here. So then I'll put the deck height back down. I'm gonna do the back one first. So it's pretty hard to get in here with a camera, but this spring down here goes in this slot, and that's connected to the engagement cable, and that runs down to the back side over here. I'll try to go around the other side and get you in there. So then it runs through that bracket right there, and then a pin goes through it. That pin is not in the best shape. I'm going to try to bend it back down so it won't fall out of there. And then we've got to do this pin on this side. We've got to slide it ahead a little, and that goes on there. And that pin will go through. I'll have to grab a pliers to slide that through. And we'll put this front deck hanger back on. Goes through like that, and then this one had a washer on it. And then I like to put the pin in this way. That way, as the mower's moving forward, if it hits something, it's still just pushing the pin in. It's not gonna push it out of there. These ones are pretty good pins though anyway. They don't pop out normally, but now we'll slide the belt back through here. This was kind of a tight fit without taking the keeper off, but slid that through, get that up and around. Check. Looks like we're still on all the pulleys. We'll engage it. That feels tight. These belts don't run all that tight, so that's about what it looks like here. Is you can still pull it pretty good with the spring tension there. So that should be good. And then I wanted to wait till it was mounted so we had a little bit sturdier mounting to bend this, but I'm going to take this wheel off. It's kicked way out to the side, and we'll try to bend that back in. I'm not sure if it's actually going to work or not, but we'll see if we can bend it without breaking anything. So this is just a 3/4 inch on the outside and then a 9/16 on the inner bolt. I'm going to raise the deck up a little bit. I'm not sure why we're still hanging so low in the front. I guess I'll have to adjust that, because it shouldn't be riding on the wheels when it's up all the way like that. I put a board under it to prop it up. Then we'll get a wrench or something on there, see if we can bend it straight. A big crescent wrench usually works pretty good. This is a 12-inch one. If you can cinch it up tight and then give it a pull. I got it kind of straight. Oh, I guess we got a flat rear tire is why the deck is sitting so low here. I forgot we had to air that one up. It's not perfect, but I don't really dare go too much farther because it's actually bending the deck. It's still pretty crooked, but it's a heck of a lot straighter than it was. It was probably out like that. So that's an improvement, but it was starting to tear right there. I think if I would have, well, that was just paint cracking, but I still don't trust that deck. I saw the whole thing popping out. So they had a thicker bracket on there, but the actual deck that they welded it to was so thin, it didn't really do it any good to have that thicker piece there. So in order to raise the front of the deck up, since it's sitting way too low, even when I aired up that tire, it's still tilted forward a lot. So this nut here was actually a little bit loose, so I'm going to run that tighter and that'll pick up the front of the deck. I might need to jack up the front end so I can get more throw out of this wrench. I went quite a ways and it's still not really doing much, so I think what I'm going to do is take this whole rod out of here. That way I can just run it down. And then you can slide this whole thing out, pivot it out of there. And I'm just going to run this down pretty tight because the threads are kind of messed up, so it's going hard too. So I'm going to run it down probably a ½ inch or so and then put it back in and test it again. So I got it ran down quite a ways farther. It's probably almost an inch farther. You normally wouldn't have to adjust it this much, but I'm thinking that some stuff is bent. So that looks a lot better. You can see that we actually have like probably close to 2.5 inches of clearance there, and that's what it should be. The deck is about halfway down the way it was before. Even when I lifted the deck all the way, the wheels were still almost on the ground. And then looking at it from the side, you could tell I might have went a little bit too far, but you're down at a little over 2. That's a lot better. So I think that'll be good for now. Well, it's a couple days later, but I'm finally getting back to this Cub Cadet. I'm gonna take it outside and test it out. One thing I was gonna show you though when I was monkeying with the adjustment on the front of the deck is there is 2 holes. There's one there and one where it's through, and I did have it in the far forward one, which makes it droop farther down. It still needed a bunch of adjustment to get it flat, but that brought it up quite a bit putting it in that hole. If you noticed at the end there, when I put it back in, I put it on the next farther in hole to get it leveled up. So we'll go out and test it out, make sure the belt stays on and everything, and make sure that that bracket doesn't crack through, which I don't think it will, but I can put quite a bit of down pressure on it and it's not flexing or anything, so we should be good there. So we'll bring it outside and test it out. Well, it seemed like everything worked okay. I couldn't mow too much with it. It's pretty wet out here, as you can see. It's been raining on and off for 2 or 3 days now, so I've been having trouble being able to get out and test anything. But I don't know how much you could see, but it did actually mow pretty nice, which is surprising. The blades weren't all that sharp. But it seems like everything's working fine now, so I'm gonna give him a call and see if he wants me to do a service on it. But other than that, this thing is good to go. And that's gonna do it for this one. If you like this sort of thing, like the videos and subscribe to the channel, and we'll catch you on the next one.